you're always in a state of in between, and you have to get comfortable with that discomfort. Because the moment that you feel comfortable with that discomfort, the moment that you'll start growing and enjoying your seasons more. And once I accepted this truth, it just changed my life completely. What's up, you guys, and welcome to another episode of Adulting with Joyce Pring. Wow, I feel like it's been a while since I've done a solo episode. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. And syempre, this is very close to my heart because we're going to be talking about adulting and how growing up is really just a huge learning curve, and that's okay. You know, when I started the podcast 7 years ago in 2018, I was in the thick of what I felt like was a transition period into adulting talaga. I realized that adulting is more than just bills and work. It's really an emotional and spiritual and personal growth period that is really so different for each and every one of us. Now, we often chase success without preparing for identity shifts, for loneliness, or emotional growth. So, I really wanted to talk about that on this episode. For this to become a safe space to talk about the real stuff, the quiet, confusing parts of becoming an adult, and how we can navigate it, as I used to say on this podcast, with much gusto. Because I feel like, now on social media, syempre filtered lagi yung nakikita natin with other people. And now we have a chance to really talk about what is important. What are the challenges that you will be facing, that we will be facing, or that we will continue to face as we grow older? And how do we navigate that properly? But before we get into that, if you're watching on Spotify, go ahead and follow the show and drop a rating. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and don't forget to tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And if you're on Facebook, make sure to follow my page, Joyce Pring, for updates and extra content. All right, let's get into it. Now, of course, a shout out first to today's sponsor, Charmy, a brand that gets it. Charmy supports women through the real life transitions we all go through, including the big and small changes in our bodies. From offering products designed for comfort and reliability to championing open conversations about menstrual health, Charmy empowers us to care for ourselves with confidence. Because periods are normal, and so is growing through every season of womanhood. More on them later, but let's get on this episode. Here are 5 realizations that I've had on adulting. First, growing pains aren't just physical. So, when I started the podcast when I was 25, ang reason ko talaga for doing that was because I felt honestly so lost. Like, obviously, meron akong, I grew older. I moved out of our house when I was very much younger. Parang mga 18 ako when I moved out of our house. I started working really, really early. But the thing that I really found to be super challenging was kind of grappling with my identity, grappling with who I was and who I am now becoming as a young woman, understanding what my boundaries were, understanding what relationships are. And that emotional, mental, spiritual journey is really something that I feel like a lot of people struggle with today. And it's also something that I struggled with when I was younger. So, one of the things that I always talk about is the importance of knowing your fundamentals. By fundamentals, I mean, what do you actually believe in and what do you value? Because if you know what you believe in and what you value, it becomes easier for you to make decisions along the way because you'll always have that tether that you can go back to. What do I mean by this? Oftentimes, we just follow whatever the trend is. That's definitely what I did before when I was younger. Whatever was trendy, whatever my friends thought, whatever I felt like at that moment, that's how I made that decision. But ultimately, I realized that because of that kind of thinking, it cost me a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenges. But when I figured out my fundamentals, meaning what do I believe in? What will I prioritize? And what is my bigger purpose or goal in life? It was easier for me to say yes and no to certain things. Um, that was like the basis or the starting point of my growth, right? But then the second layer to that was understanding that even though I had these fundamentals in place, I should never expect perfection from myself. Because if there was anything that adulting was teaching me, it was that yes, my body is changing, yes, my season is changing, yes, my life was changing, but it will never be perfect. If I looked at everybody on my feed at that time, or if I compared myself to some of my friends who are already in medical school, who are already buying their first property, who are already driving their first cars, I would constantly be torn by that. So I realized that instead of comparing myself to others, instead of gunning for perfection, what I will continuously focus on was a growth mindset. If I knew my values and my priorities, the next layer to that is to always be in a state of growth, meaning I may not be at the place where I want to be right now, but I am headed towards there. So that really gave me a lot of introspection. It gave me a lot of good perspective because every time I was going through, being overwhelmed, being emotionally distressed, having that inner tension, I felt like I got this covered. This is okay because I know my foundation and I know that I am just gunning for a growth kind of mindset. So if that's you right now, you're a young person, you're trying to figure life out, medyo nagsastruggle ka pa rin kasi maybe you just got out of school or you're in university right now, figure that out for yourself. You write it down. Ako, that really helped me. I wrote it down. I wrote down ano yung mga pinaniniwalaan ko. Like, what is my faith? What is my belief system? What do I believe about the world? That's the first part. Second, what are my priorities right now? Is my priorities, getting good at school, reaching this particular thing, having more healthy relationships, not constantly being in the state of flight or panic or fight or flight. Whatever those priorities and whatever those values are, write them down and always look back at it when you're trying to make a decision. And pangalawa, ingrain that in your head that comparison is the thief of joy. Comparing your life to the lives of other people will never make you happier. It will always make you question yourself. But if you are grateful and if you are just focused on having a growth kind of mindset, then you don't need perfection. You just constantly have to be 1% better every single day. Number two, and probably one of the harder lessons that I had to learn, was that friendships will change, and that's okay. As you grow, your values and your relationships will evolve, and sometimes you will drift from your childhood friends to then having new friends that you become really close with. And you know, it's a two-pronged thing again. So the first part of that was there's really a lot of grief that you have to hold space for when it comes to relationships because I had to grieve a lot of the friendships that I used to hold close in my heart that I realized was no longer growing with me. It wasn't that I cut people off, it was more of I accepted that, for example, I'm no longer as important to them as I used to be, or they don't want to make time for me as they used to, or it's the same for me. Like, I'm no longer interested in, making an effort to go out with this person because we don't value the same things anymore, or we don't have the same kind of lifestyle. And at the beginning of that lesson in my adulthood, I really held on to a lot of those relationships just because ang tagal ko ng kaibigan 'tong taong 'to, eh. I mean, grade school pa lang kami, friends na kami, or high school pa lang kami, magkaibigan na kami. But then I realized that it's okay for you to outgrow people and for other people to outgrow you. It doesn't mean that you cut them off or you're no longer friends. It's okay to just kind of stagnate in your friendship. And maybe, God willing, one day you will reconnect. That certainly happened in one of my most important friendships. I had a girlfriend who, she moved to a different country, she had a different job, she wasn't replying to me or anything like that, but she was my best friend in high school. But then after a few years, when she got married and she was in the same season of life that I was in, we reconnected and it felt like nothing even changed between the two of us. So you just kind of have to hold space for that and be like, okay, it's okay if I grieve this friendship. It's okay if this friendship is something that I will let go and not spend as much time in anymore. We're still friends. It's just that this is not a friendship or a relationship that I could really invest in at the moment, or this person is willing to invest in with me at the moment. Set that aside. That's okay. That's normal. It's part of growing up. And the other side of that is you have to open yourself up for meaningful, deeper relationships as you grow older. I'll be honest with you, my best friend right now is still my best friend from when I was 9 years old. So, she's been a rock in my life. She's been an honest friend. She's been a consistent friend. And she's one of those people that has constantly made an effort to be present in my life, in my children's life when they came, in my married life when I got with Juancho. So I've always I've always had friends like that. And I was talking to somebody recently and I said, alam mo yung mga best friends ko talaga, minimum 10 years of friendship. Kasi ang tagal-tagal-tagal na namin magkakaibigan. And I always stick close to them. But at the same time, I've realized that you have to learn to open yourself up to new relationships and friendships. And this was especially true for me kasi in 2020, we moved to a different city, way down south, very far from where I grew up, which is in Quezon City. And all of my friends were in QC, siguro yung pinakamalapit na sa akin taga Pasig, ganyan. Pero ako ang layo, as in talagang out of Metro Manila yung bahay namin. And I was really grieving those friendships because I couldn't see them. I would only see them once a month, once every 2 months. If they come visit me, because I had, I was starting a family, I was in a different season of life. And that really made me sad. But 2 years ago, when I made this decision na, teka, there are good people in this area, in my community, that I could be really close friends with. Why am I not making an effort to invest in those relationships? So I did. I made that actually not drastic pala. I made that simple decision that made a drastic impact in my life, which was to invest in those new relationships, to open myself up to new people, and to cherish and nurture those friendships. And, for the first time in 4 years since I moved to this different city, or 5 years na pala, for the first time in 5 years, I had dinner with these new friends that I made in my new community for my birthday. And it was just so special. And I felt like, wow, I really do feel like I belong in this group, that I belong in this city, that I've made new friends, that I've fostered deep relationships. Just because I did the two things. I held space for my grief, for my sadness about, the changing relationships in my life, while at the same time, I opened myself up for these new relationships. So just accept that that's part of growing up. And just because you're not connecting with the same people that you used to before doesn't mean it's forever going to be like that. You'll never know if you could still reconnect with someone, diba, when you're in a different season of life, in a different city. Or sometimes what happens to me is when I'm traveling and then that person lives in this country or in this city, I can message them and connect with them. So be open to that as well. Number 3, it's okay to feel in between. I'm 32 right now. And it might surprise you, but I still do feel like I'm in an in between stage of my life. Why? Because, so when I was in my early 20s, I felt like I was in my in between because I was no longer a kid, but I didn't feel like a full adult because I was just figuring out work and living by myself, and I started paying bills and things like that. I started taking care of myself. So parang I really did feel in between during that time as somebody who used to be a student to now transitioning. Parang nasa transition period ako into fully becoming an adult, taking care of myself, paying all of the bills, doing all this work, etc., etc. Now that I'm 32 naman, it still feels like I'm in an in-between stage. Why? Because yes, I'm 32. Yes, I do have a family. I do have my husband. I do have my children. But there's so much of me that feels like a young woman still. I'm still in my early 30s. Many of my friends are, not yet married. They're not yet having families. They're not yet or will never be in that season of life. So I don't fully feel as if I'm in the family, taking care of kids, and not fully in that season yet, because there's also this part of me that still feels like a young woman figuring life out. So what I'm trying to say here is the feeling of being in between is just a normal part of life. I remember thinking that I will one day arrive at a season of life where I felt most comfortable and most confident. But I realize now that life is a constant growth journey. You're always transitioning from one period to another. You're always transitioning from one season to another. You're always in a state of in between, and you have to get comfortable with that discomfort. Because the moment that you feel comfortable with that discomfort, the moment that you'll start growing and enjoying your seasons more. Kesa hintayin mo na, I'm perfect at this already. I've got this all figured out. Just accept that there will never come a day where you'll have it all figured out. But there will come a day where you're more confident and you're more, you're more balanced in your ways. You're more you've adapted more to the season that you're in. But that level of perfection, or that level of being having arrived, will never come, because being in the in between is always just a part of our lives. Number 4, your body changes, so should your routine. So when I was younger, syempre yung puberty and body shifts, all of those things, they were very confusing to me, and nobody really gives a manual for that. I remember not even knowing yung mga phases of our menstrual cycle. I remember like panicking the first time that I got my period because I had no idea what to do. I remember feeling a lot of shame because of it. I remember feeling a lot of discomfort and not knowing how to navigate it. I remember being a young woman and forgetting that, oy, kailangan ko nga pala magbaon ng napkin or something, 'di ba? Or I just remember not being able to talk to any of my friends about it because there's just so much shame around that. And I think one of the blessings that adulthood has given me, that growing up has given me, and that becoming a woman has given me, is accepting my body in all of its seasons, in all of its entirety, in all of the different changes and phases that it goes through. I realized that unless I addressed my own insecurities and shame, there will always be insecurity and shame attached to my body. So now I'm learning to love it more, to honor it more, and to cater to it more according to whatever phase or season I'm in. When I was in puberty, when I was a teenager, what I was learning to accept and understand was, okay, my body is changing. I feel different. I'm going through, my menstrual cycle. Ganito pala yun na pag parating na siya, parang pagod na pagod ka, parang you're so tired, parang you're so exhausted, parang you're so stressed. Alam ko na masungit ako during that time. So, kapag nararamdaman ko na masungit ako, I will really, when I know I'm in that period or phase in my in my menstrual cycle, I know already na, okay, I should not be getting into arguments or doing, making important conversations during this day or during this next few days because I'm very emotional. It's just the hormones that I'm going through. So, I'm planning my life around that already. When I was a young woman, when I started doing athletics, I knew then how to prepare for it. Like if I know what phase I'm on, then I know how to prepare for it. What do I baon? What do I bring? How do I train? All those things. And then when I became a mom, it became so much more profound for me because then I understood on such a deep and personal level what my body was truly capable of to be able to bear children, to have my kids, um, and then to still train for a marathon, and then to still be active and do all of those things and to breastfeed and, all those things that become a part of your womanhood if you were a mother, as I am. It makes you appreciate your body so much na whatever shame I had before is now completely converted into inspiration and gratitude for the kind of body that God has given me because mas naiintindihan ko na siya. Kaya pala importante yung mga hormones natin. Kaya pala importante na naiintindihan ko yung body ko. Kaya pala it's important to care for your body with intention, whether you are single or married, whether you have kids or you're a single woman. Kaya pala sobrang importante nun because it's such a huge part of your life. It's something that you will constantly have to deal with. So I feel like that's just one of the things that I wanted to impart with you, especially the ladies right now. You have to learn to love your body, to honor it, to accept it, and to care for it intentionally because it's the only body that you will ever have. And it's such a wonderful creation that you really have to take care of and not feel shame about, not feel guilty or insecure about, but something that you should celebrate and get strong. Let's be real. Most of us didn't grow up with proper guidance on period care. It was awkward, rushed, or skipped entirely. But menstruation is completely normal. And taking care of yourself during your period should be too. That's why I'm genuinely so grateful for brands like Charmy who are changing the way we experience period care. They're not just creating products, they're helping us rewrite the narrative around periods. From shame and confusion to confidence and comfort. Whether it's their all-night long napkins that give you leak-free sleep or their menstrual pants for extra heavy flow days, or even their breathable green tea panty liners that help you stay fresh every single day, Charmy has you covered, literally. And if you're on the go, don't forget their eucalyptus feminine wipes. They give you that clean, refreshed feeling when you need it the most. May 28th is Menstrual Hygiene Day, a great reminder that hygiene isn't just about looking good. It's about feeling good and honoring the body that God gave you with grace. This Menstrual Hygiene Awareness Month, let's break the silence with #UnwrapWithCharmy with confidence, comfort, and care because periods shouldn't be awkward. They're normal, and caring for yourself should feel that way too. Fifth and finally, your priorities will start to shift. And the caveat of this is your priorities will start to shift according to the season of life that you are currently at. That is so true. And once I accepted this truth, it just changed my life completely. When you're in school, your priorities are for sure your friends, going out with your friends, getting to know your friends, hanging out with your friends. Probably it's school if you're a good student. It's, probably all of that. It's really more of what can I do with my friends? How can I excel in school? That's your priority. And then you get out of school and then you're working already and your priority is I need to make money. I need to be able to save. I need to be able to pay for my bills. I need to be able to, take care of myself, pay for all of the adulting things that I need to take care of. Maybe if you're like me, travel. But travel was such a huge part of my young adulthood. When I was in my early 20s, I was like, this is my priority. I need to travel. I need to do all of these things. And then it changed. When I was in my mid 20s, I was like, okay, I did all of the work thing. I did all of the travel thing. My priority right now is to find someone that I can do life with. I want to have a serious romantic relationship. I want to be able to have a family one day, 5 years down the road. I want to be able to do all of these other things. I want to buy a house and things like that. So, what I'm trying to say is your priorities will constantly change. That's why at the beginning of this episode, I was saying, figure out already what is it that you value? What is it that you believe in? What is the worldview through which you want to perceive the world and you want to live your life? Because once you know those things, then it's easier for you to shift your priorities, to say your yeses and your nos, and to spend your time intentionally. Because at the end of the day, that's really what adulting is all about. It's making decisions according to what you value and spending your time intentionally so that you don't waste it. I'm not saying have fun, not have fun. I'm not saying not do the silly things that young adults do. Make space for that. Follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, follow your schedule. Always be on top of everything. But then 20% of the time, be spontaneous. Do something fun. Do something that you really didn't plan for. But that can only happen. I really believe that spontaneity can truly only successfully happen when we have built structure around our lives that will cater to what we value the most and what we perceive to be our purpose in our lives are. And I know that's such a huge thing to think about when you're a young person, but I promise you, the more that you think about it, the more that you practice it, the more that you write it down, the more that you allow yourself to just kind of grapple with it, to have that kind of tension and then to release that tension, the more that it becomes easier. Because I find that when I was younger, nung iniiwasan kong pag-isipan yun na, I don't want to think about my purpose. That's too much pressure. I don't want to think about my goals. That's too much pressure. The more that it became hard for me. But when I did that simple hard work of, okay, I'm going to sit down, think about what I truly believe in, think about what I value and what I love and what I want to achieve, and I'm going to make decisions and plan accordingly, the easier my life got. I mean, of course, there are still challenges. Of course, there's still things that go wrong or that don't go according to plan, but it's just so much easier when you know your priorities because that's the only way that you can really spend your time wisely. So there, I mean, I hope that those are reflections that will help you in your own journey as your adulting ate. I just wanted to encourage you that it does get easier. You do experience that kind of flow state where you're enjoying and having a good time, and it's not so rigid, and you're actually having a good time as an adult because adulting does have a lot of challenges. It does come with a lot of difficulty, but it's also such a beautiful, wonderful, life changing period of your life that you really have to learn to cherish. But before we wrap up, I just want to say a big thank you once again to our sponsor, Charmy, for partnering with us on this episode. It means so much to work with a brand that doesn't just create products, but also stands for something bigger. Charmy is committed to making period care more approachable, less awkward, and genuinely empowering for women of all ages and, of course, all seasons. Thank you once again, Charmy, for helping us create the safe, honest space to talk about growing up, taking care of ourselves, and embracing all the beautiful, complicated parts of being a woman. To anyone out there who's feeling the weight of growing up, know this: you are not alone. You don't need to have it all figured out. Take each step as it comes and trust that God has already gone before you, preparing the way. That's it for this episode of Adulting with Joyce Pring. If you want to continue the conversation, please do let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.